Hi, I'm Joyce,
I'm Adriel.
and we are Divinely Guided. We hope you've been taking some time for yourself. We hope you have been practicing some self care. We hope that you will make leave a comment and let us know which of the self care tips that we've shared that you have taken part in. We would really like to hear from you. Right? Yes. And so tonight we're going to continue from our general theme of self-care. And I do want to remind you that right now we're in self-care, but the name of our podcast is Divinely Guided because we want to be divinely guided to discuss things. So right now it's self-care, but we always leave room for other things, right? Mm-hmm. But tonight we're talking about a very important thing when it comes to self-care, and that is establishing healthy boundaries. And so I'm going to let Adrielle introduce our topic tonight.
Okay, so boundaries are incredibly important. Again, I think I said this last time we were having a conversation on this podcast that this isn't the thing that you traditionally think about when you think about self-care, but it's extremely important. Was that the last episode or the one before?
Maybe the one before.
Okay.
When we talked about expanding your mind.
Oh, okay. Well, it's important to establish boundaries, I think, in relationships of all kinds, and even boundaries with yourself. So for me, one of my boundaries with myself is screen time. After 10 o'clock on weeknights, all my apps turn off. And that's a boundary that I don't really cross.
That's a great boundary, too.
Yeah, because I don't need to be scrolling after 10 o'clock anyway. Text messages come through, phone calls come through, but if it's Snapchat or Instagram or something, that's not going to come through. I don't need to see that anyway. So
you have your computer, you have your phone set so that it doesn't come through.
They turn off.
Okay.
Like the apps gray out and they turn off. So that's a boundary that I'm pretty serious about. I have boundaries with my time. That's kind of with other people. Like on Saturday mornings when I get up and I do my yoga and I go get my bagels, that's like me time. And there needs to be boundaries, I think, with time that's just for you and for what you need it to be. It kind of goes back to our personal time.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a boundary. And it's interesting how other people respond to your boundaries because you kind of are able to tell the place your relationship is in when you're able to lay a boundary and it's respected. Like when the boundary's not hurting you or anyone else and you lay the boundary and you say, this is what I need to do to be my best self, and people respect the boundary that you lay there. Incredibly important.
Yes, and that's a great... Go ahead.
But so I think when it comes to relationships, especially romantic ones, sometimes you're so close to that person and I think I saw this on your screen over there, but it's something I wanted to touch on. You can get that kind of codependent kind of thing going, especially depending. Some people are more prone to codependency than others.
True.
So I think it's super important to set aside boundaries of just things that time that's just for you, time where you're not worried about y'all, time where it's just you. So it will help prevent some of that codependency and it'll help maintain some individuality. It's incredibly important. But I think there's one thing I want to say before I dive in a little bit deeper. There's building walls and shutting everybody out, and then there's building boundaries. And I think sometimes there's a negative... It's gotten a little bit better, but there's kind of a negative stigma around the word boundary, like you're locking yourself in. It's a wall. I don't have walls. I have boundaries. You got to protect your peace and certain things you don't allow in. I'm kind of all over the place, but I see what I'm trying to say. But you have to protect your peace. There's certain conversations I no longer have with people. I'm like, that's just not a conversation that I'm willing to have. So that's a boundary. But it's all about protecting my peace and kind of putting my mental state first. That's just a boundary that won't be crossed. Did I finish my thought earlier? Or did I deviate?
You have made a lot of really good points.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So I looked up some benefits of setting boundaries, and I think some of these I've already touched on. But it wards off burnout because when you're setting those boundaries, there are times where you're like, I'm done. And that's a boundary. That Saturday morning, that's me. You've talked about your Saturday morning, I think, before. That was a boundary.
I have.
Yeah, and it can help prevent the burnout. Improved emotional health. I think whenever you're less burned out, that's going to improve your emotional health. I touched on relationships. It says improve relationships, not just romantic, but of all kinds. Because the people that we love, we still need boundaries with them.
Absolutely.
And it's not, again, it's not a wall. It's just a boundary, and it's going to make your relationship better because you have the boundary. So it sets clear expectations for others, which it absolutely does. Like, you're like, here's what we're going to do, and here's the expectation. And then, like I said, when people respect you and they respect your boundaries, they're able to meet you where you are with them, and vice versa. It causes decreased stress, improved self-care capabilities, respect from others, and self-respect. And it promotes autonomy, which is what I was talking about when it comes to the codependency, which is the exact opposite of codependency. You have your kind of your own autonomy, your own choices that you're making for your own benefit, and it helps you maintain a sense of individuality. Especially, and that can happen with you and your job too, not even just you and your relationships with people. I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in what we do that we're like, oh, I am this. It's like, no, you're also a lot of other things. Like for me, you are a social worker, yes, but I'm also many other things, and I'm not, like, my whole life isn't my job. So you come home and you, like, detach. And for me, I don't do anything work related. I don't check any emails, because I do get work emails on my phone. I don't look at them. I don't glance at them. When it's done, it's done. And that's a boundary. So it helps you to have boundaries, can help you to have a more well-rounded life.
I agree.
So what about you?
You said so many good things. I didn't want to interrupt you, but then in not interrupting you, I have now lost some of the things that came in my mind, because I will forget in a heartbeat. But you just mentioned so many good things, and I'll just start right where you are right now. You mentioned jobs. That was one of the things that I was never really good at, is establishing that boundary where I let work go when I went home. It always went with me. If I had a student who was struggling in my class, for me, that was a personal challenge. So I would be up late night thinking, how can I go over this subject matter in a way that they can grasp it? Because what I did, because I gave a lot of quizzes in my class, not as a way to punish my class, but as a way for me to monitor their understanding. Because the first time I taught, I thought I was doing well, and then I gave them a test and they did horribly, and I was like, okay, they didn't get that at all. And so I started doing the quizzes. But when they would do poorly, then I would come back and I was like, okay, so the way I explained that did not work for them. How can I then go back? Which made me a good instructor, but it also led to a lot of my personal burnout. You say it prevents burnout when you establish those boundaries. But I just was never really good at it. Or if I had a student at Auburn who I was an advisor for multiple student groups, and I was very much involved with my student groups.
You were.
And so they would call me. They would call me late at night. They would call me on Sunday afternoon. They would call, if they were having a personal issue, if they were having a disagreement with another student in the group, I would go meet with them on Sundays. I would go after work. I did not do a good job of establishing those boundaries. And I think there's one reason probably why I got burnt out and retired, quote unquote, early.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like I didn't have any more to give. So I do think that is very important. Because I even had students who would track me down basically when they needed something. They knew. Some of them knew where my mom lived. They knew we hung out there. They would come by my mom's house or find the number and call. And even one day my mom was like, Joyce, that's too much. But so I was never really good at those boundaries. And so I agree that is something that is very important. And you say in relationships, I think that is very important. And you said romantic relationships, but also personal relationships. And I think that is, of course, the romantic relationships, those boundaries that you have to set, I think that kind of goes without saying. But I think sometimes we have to realize that we need to establish those boundaries with our personal relationships.
Yeah.
With you and I. We are very close as mother-daughter.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel you politely establishing a boundary. Because you feel like, okay, mommy, you're in my space.
Yeah.
And so I get tickled or not, but those boundaries need to be established because it does, because we've taken a change, we've transitioned rather from being an adult and a child.
Yes.
Because at 25, almost 26, you're very much an adult now.
26 next month.
And so I have to catch myself.
Yeah.
And some things, some decisions that you make, of course, you already know I don't agree with all of them. But then I have to realize it does not matter if I agree with all of them. If you're not doing something that's hurting you or hurting someone else, you have a right to make those decisions. And one of those boundaries that has to be established is I can say, well, I don't agree with it, or I wouldn't have done it that way, but that's your decision and that's okay. You have to live with the results, the consequences of your own decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think in personal family relationships, it's almost even more important because family, we can just start running over each other without thinking about it.
Yeah.
But
not meaning anything.
Right. Not that's why I say not even thinking anything about it. You don't mean any harm, because I never would mean you any harm. But I realize I have as Edgar says, I have a very large personality.
Yeah.
A very strong personality, and I'll catch myself bulldozing.
Yeah.
But those boundaries have to be established.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that as well. And then of course the romantic relationships and that whole concept of codependency. You see that so often. Sometimes I think that's why relationships end up failing. Because there are not enough clearly defined boundaries. And then it's almost like you've lost yourself, as you were saying, in the other person.
Yeah.
And you become so dependent on that other person completing you. No one should complete you. You should be complete when you go to that person. And you should be two complete individuals. You can't be 50-50. I got to be 100% me and you got to be 100% you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But people do that and they get lost in that. And that's a lot of weight to carry, especially if you feel like you are the one who is carrying the larger burden of the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's very it's easy to get burned out with a relationship that way. And I think that's why some relationships and sometimes you can just see it happening. I know with a relationship that was within the overall family, not the immediate family, but I could see that happening where one of the partners was just they needed the other person to complete them so much till they became a burden to the other person.
Yeah.
Without realizing it. It's like you're becoming a weight for someone to carry. So you do need to establish those boundaries and those expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that is great for self-care. You may not think of it, but again, it's just like expanding your mind. It's one of the things that are critically important.
Yeah.
When it comes to self-care. Because you're defining who you are and what's acceptable for you, and you act in that manner. And people will respond to you accordingly when you establish those boundaries. And then people who will not respond to your boundaries are probably people you should kind of keep at arm's length anyway.
Absolutely.
If they will not respect your boundaries. I will admit though, with me, like I said, I struggle with the boundaries, and mine is more out of a sense of care for the people that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
If I don't care much about you, I don't have any problem establishing a boundary. As a matter of fact, I quite often probably even set up a wall. I'll just be honest. I probably just set up that wall. So I remember once I had somebody tell me, I hate it when you get like that. Because it's like that wall is up, it's closed down, I'm done. And I'm like, oh, I hate when you get that way. But so it's easy when there's no care. But when there's care, I'm always coming from a place of, but I'm trying to look out for what's best for you. But that's a bad choice. Don't you see that's a bad choice? And so I have to deliberately stop and step back and say, okay, That's all right. You have your decision, and I'm going to take 3 steps back because I'm going to respect that boundary. And that's one of the things that we talk about in our extended family when it comes to our young adults now.
Yeah.
Because we're all so accustomed to you all being our kids, and
Yeah.
you all are collectively our kids. And all of us consider you our kids. And so we treat you like you're our kids.
Yeah.
But now you are all young adults. I mean, when the youngest in your generation is what? 21.
Almost 22.
Yeah, be 22 soon. So you all are young adults. And so I have that conversation with my sisters sometimes. I'm like, okay, we got to just step back and let them be them. We have to trust that what we've taught you, you have taken it, you've grown from it, you've learned to make good choices, you've grown into a productive, good human being, and that you can make your choices and live with them. So, though establishing those boundaries they're really important.
They are.
They are.
They're good for you and everybody around you, really. So
I'm glad you came up with that topic.
yeah, I love talking about boundaries.
Because I wouldn't have thought of that, but it's so important to your overall self-care.
It is.
Because when someone is not respecting your boundaries, they're stepping all over you. You, like you said, you carry the weight of trying to do what they want you to do or be who they want you to be.
Yeah.
Rather than establishing your boundaries and saying, this is who I am, this is what works for me, that no longer serves me. So I guess I need to work a little bit more on boundaries instead of walls. Because like I said, I will just set up a wall, particularly with people who, some people, their spirit doesn't match yours.
Yeah, they just don't align.
They don't align. That's a good way. They don't align. And so I just put that wall there, and it's like, it doesn't matter what you do. I don't care if you go jump off that cliff. I'm not going to be moved by it at all. So I established those walls, and then I have Julia calling me emotionless because the wall is up. Well, that was good. So is there anything else that you wanted to say about boundaries and establishing boundaries in your life?
I think we talked about it. I think we got it.
Okay, and let me look. I think we talked about, because we talked about the autonomy and setting expectations. I heard you say it. We didn't go into a lot of detail on it, but it does help with your sense of empowerment and self-respect. Because once you establish, this is who I am, this is what I want, and this is how I want it, and this is your action. This is what is acceptable, and this is what's gone too far.
Yeah.
It does empower you. Ensures your physical and emotional comfort. I think you may have mentioned that. Clarifies individual responsibilities in a relationship. Now, that is a good one.
Yeah.
Separates your wants, your needs, your thoughts, and your feelings from those of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Basically codifying your own self-identity. Yeah, by establishing your own set of boundaries. So those are some of the things that I had taken note of when it came to boundaries. Yes. Well, very good. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that was a good one.
Drink water.
So, so what about you? Have you established clear boundaries in your life? Do you see areas of your life that you need to establish some more boundaries? Do you have relationships where you need to establish boundaries? Do you have friendships, family relationships, work relationships where you need to establish those boundaries? Work on establishing those boundaries. Identify clearly what works for you and stand on it. And if people can't accept your boundaries, you need to put a little bit of distance between you and them, because obviously they don't respect you enough to respect your boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's not someone you need to be close to you in your life.
Yeah, that's a dead giveaway.
It is absolutely a giveaway. Absolutely. Well, very good. Well, we hope you will establish some boundaries. You hope you will take some personal time. We hope you will do something that will expand your mind and horizons. We hope you are practicing a little bit of meditation or some yoga, or that you are doing some positive affirmations,
Really
that you're
good
doing
job.
things that are feeding your spirit, that you are doing things for self-care because you deserve it. Good night.
Good night.